There are truths so subtle, so quietly threaded to the fabric of daily life, that they rarely reveal themselves unless something in you slows down long enough to feel the vibration beneath events. At first glance, the idea that a hidden frequency could be shaping every thought you have ever held may seem like something lifted from a forgotten myth or an esoteric manuscript sealed away in an ancient temple. Yet, when approached with gentler gaze, when examined with the same attentiveness you might offer a shifting breeze or a faint pulse beneath the skin, the idea begins to feel less like fantasy and more like a truth you have always sensed in the background but never fully named. It is the whisper at the threshold of consciousness, the hum behind your memories, the quiet architecture guiding how meaning crystallizes inside your mind. Most people move through the world believing their thoughts arise independently, that their inner monologue is authored by the logical progression of their own life experiences. But if you allow yourself to listen more deeply, you may sense something uncanny. The thoughts you claim as your own often arrive unannounced, shaped not by personal intention, but by patterns that existed long before your awareness caught up to them. They emerge like echoes from an unseen chamber, like ripples from a stone you do not remember throwing. And if thoughts can appear without your deliberate command, then what or where is the source? What invisible rhythm is feeding them into your mind? To approach this question honestly is to enter a territory where science, philosophy, and metaphysics blur into one another. Neuroscientists might describe brainwaves oscillating in delicate patterns, creating an electromagnetic landscape through which consciousness passes. Mystics might speak of the mind as a vibrating field attuned to broader cosmic currents. Philosophers might argue that thoughts are not inventions but perceptions, filter expressions of a deeper layer of reality. And perhaps all these interpretations are fragments of a single underlying truth, that consciousness is not an isolated island, but an instrument, constantly tuned by frequencies permeating both the inner and outer worlds. Imagine for a moment that your mind is a vast chamber shaped not by walls, but by resonances. Every idea, every emotion, every subtle flicker of inner commentary forms not as isolated sparks, but as responses to something humming beneath them. You might picture this hidden frequency as a foundation tone beneath a symphony, the kind of note you cannot hear directly yet feel as a presence holding the entire composition together. Without it, the orchestra would sound disjointed, confused, directionless. With it, thoughts fall into patterns, feelings gain coherence, and behavior follows unspoken rules that seem to arise effortlessly from the depths of your being. Some people encounter this hidden frequency during moments of silence, when the mind suddenly becomes still enough to sense the quiet pulse underneath experience. Others notice it during crises, when the normal noise of the world collapses and something more essential bleeds through the cracks. Still others glimpse it in moments of transcendence, such as when staring at a night sky so vast and ancient that the boundaries of the self seem to dissolve. In these rare openings, you do not think about the frequency so much as recognize it, the way a tuning fork recognizes its own pitch when struck by a matching tone. And once you recognize it, even for a moment, something irreversible begins. You start to see that many of the thoughts you once assumed were authored by your personal identity were in fact shaped by patterns you inherited from family, culture, memory, trauma, and unseen collective forces. You realize the mind is less like an autonomous engine and more like an antenna that has been receiving transmissions your whole life. Some signals are loud and persistent, rooted in old fears or conditioned habits. Others are gentle and fragile, like invitations from a future self you have not yet fully become. All of them together create the illusion of a single, unbroken narrative called your thoughts, even though their origins are far more intricate and multidimensional. This hidden frequency is not sinister, nor is it benevolent. It is neutral, like the laws of gravity or the cycles of the moon. But what makes it profound is that it shapes the quality, texture, and trajectory of your entire inner world. Everything from spontaneous insights to the persistent loop of self-doubt arises from your attunement to particular frequencies. When you resonate with lower emotional vibrations, your thoughts collapse into scarcity, fear, and tightened perceptions. When you resonate with higher patterns, your thinking expands effortlessly, unlocking creativity, resilience, and a sense of interconnectedness that lifts you beyond personal struggle. Understanding this frequency does not require blind belief, only a willingness to observe. Because the moment you start watching your thoughts rather than being carried by them, You begin to sense the rhythm that produces them. You notice how certain environments change the texture of your thinking, how certain people pull you into different mental states, how silence alters your inner tone more profoundly than words ever could. And all of this reveals something remarkable. The frequency is not fixed. It can shift, transform, evolve. It can be tuned. To study this hidden frequency is to study the architecture of consciousness itself. It is to unmask the invisible scaffolding behind your identity, to discover the subtle energetic field through which all meaning passes before it becomes thought. And once you begin to perceive this field, you also begin to understand that your awareness, is the tuning mechanism. The quality of your attention sharpens or distorts the signal. Your emotional state amplifies or muffles it. Your behavioral patterns align with it or resist it. You are not a slave to the frequency, but neither are you separate from it. You are its interpreter, its instrument, its living expression. Everything you have ever thought has been shaped by this hidden vibration. And if you learn to tune it consciously, then everything you will think from this moment forward can become a deliberate co-creation with a deeper intelligence beneath your everyday awareness. This realization does not diminish your autonomy. It expands it. It allows you to step beyond the illusion of randomness and into a more intimate relationship with the unseen rhythm that has always guided you. If the introduction reveals the existence of a hidden frequency shaping every thought you have ever experienced, then exploring the core themes of this frequency means stepping deeper into the interior architecture of consciousness itself. This frequency is not something you can touch with a hand or isolate with scientific instruments in the ordinary sense, but it can be felt, sensed, and recognized in the way one recognizes a familiar fragrance without recalling where it came from. It is the underlying resonance that gives structure to awareness, the silent pattern keeper that turns raw perception into meaning. To understand the nature of this frequency is to unravel the silent laws that have been guiding your inner world long before you ever question why your mind works the way it does. At the heart of this concept lies the recognition that consciousness is not merely a biological accident produced by neural firings inside the skull. It is a field, expansive and permeable, constantly weaving itself through both the material and immaterial layers of existence. Your thoughts are not created in isolation. They are responses to shifts in this field. The brain is not the generator, but the interpreter, much like a finely crafted instrument that amplifies whispers passing through the air. When your inner environment aligns with certain frequency, thoughts of a matching tone naturally arise, as though consciousness and reality are playing a duet composed long before either one became aware of the other. To understand this relationship, imagine that each thought is a note produced from the strings of your awareness. Some notes resonate with clarity and strength, carrying insights that feel timeless and profound. Others vibrate with dissonance, shaped by fear, scarcity, or the residue of past wounds. What determines which notes arise is not random. It is the tuning of the underlying frequency. When the frequency dips into lower emotional states, perhaps due to stress, trauma, or inherited patterns, the notes produced echo that heaviness. Thoughts may tighten, looping endlessly through anxiety or self-criticism. But when the frequency rises, attuned to clarity, openness, and curiosity, the mind begins to produce thoughts that feel more spacious, more connected, more aligned with the deeper truth of who you are. This idea may remind you of the ancient notion that reality expresses itself through vibration. Across cultures and generations, people have attempted to articulate the same insight using different languages and metaphors. In some traditions, this frequency is described as the vibration of the soul. In others, it is a universal energy field that permeates all beings. More modern interpretations might call it the electromagnetic signature of consciousness or the quantum fabric binding the observer to the observed. But beneath all these interpretations lies the same foundational concept. There's a hidden rhythm to existence, and your thoughts are not separate from that rhythm. They are shaped by it. To grasp the core themes of this hidden frequency is also to understand that much of what you perceive as personal thought is actually a byproduct of collective resonance. You are part of a vast psychological ecosystem in which individual and collective fields continually overlap. Many of your habitual patterns, emotional tendencies, and unconscious beliefs are tuned not only by your personal past, but by cultural narratives, ancestral memories, and the unspoken emotional atmospheres of the environments you inhabit. From this perspective, the hidden frequency is both intimate and universal. It is as close as your own breath, yet as expansive as the collective memory of humanity. Another essential theme is the fluidity of the frequency itself. Although it shapes your thoughts, it is also shaped by your awareness. Your emotional responses, habitual inner dialogues, and daily rituals all contribute to the frequency you maintain. When awareness is scattered or dulled, the frequency becomes clouded, and thoughts arise in fragmented, reactive patterns. But when awareness becomes intentional and grounded, the frequency becomes coherent, producing thoughts that feel purposeful, insightful, and aligned. This dynamic interplay reveals something profound. The hidden frequency is not a fixed force dictating your life. It is a living relationship between your consciousness and the larger field of reality. The hidden frequency also introduces the idea that thoughts are not neutral. They carry weight, texture, density. A thought born from fear has a different resonance than one born from curiosity or courage. The frequency you inhabit not only influences the quality of thoughts that arise, but also determines what those thoughts can access. When you are tuned to lower states, your thinking contracts, seeing only obstacles or threats. But when tuned to higher states, your thinking expands, revealing possibilities, solutions, and insights that were invisible before. This is why moments of elevation, whether through beauty, silence, or inner clarity, often lead to sudden breakthroughs or realizations that seem to emerge from nowhere. In truth, they were always present, waiting for you to step into the frequency that could perceive them. A final theme emerges when you consider the role of identity. Most people believe they're the thinker of their thoughts, the author behind the inner stream of commentary weaving through each day. But when you observe the hidden frequency with sincere curiosity, you begin to see that thoughts are more like visitors than residents. They move through you, shaped by vibrational patterns you may not consciously perceive. Identity, then, is not the thoughts themselves, but the awareness that witnesses them. Awareness is a lighthouse, while thoughts are the passing ships. The hidden frequency determines which ships arrive, how long they stay, and what stories they carry. Understanding these themes does not require abandoning logic or embracing mysticism blindly. It requires a willingness to see consciousness not as a closed system, but as something permeable, dynamic, and deeply connected to forces that operate both within and beyond the boundaries of the physical mind. The hidden frequency is not an enemy to be defeated, nor a mystery to be decoded. It is a guiding pulse, an invitation to participate in a more intentional, more expansive relationship with your own inner world. As you step further into this exploration, the idea becomes less about controlling thoughts and more about tuning consciousness. You are not here to wrestle with every mental ripple, but to recognize the waters beneath them. Once you understand the frequency that shapes thought, you gain access to a deeper intelligence, one that has been guiding you quietly, patiently, from the very beginning. To understand a concept as elusive as a hidden frequency shaping the entire landscape of your thoughts, sometimes logic and abstract explanation are not enough. There are truths that reveal themselves only through story, through symbols that bypass the rigid structures of the analytical mind and speak directly to the deeper layers of awareness. Symbolic narratives allow the hidden architecture of reality to become visible in ways that ordinary language cannot touch. They offer a different kind of knowing, a knowing felt rather than dissected, recognized rather than analyzed. In this space, the hidden frequency becomes not just an idea but an experience, something you can sense moving beneath the surface of your own inner world. Consider first the image of an ancient, submerged bell lying at the bottom of a vast lake. The bell is enormous, larger than a house, crafted with sacred inscriptions that no one alive remembers how to read. For centuries, it has rested silently beneath the water, covered in silt and the slow accumulation of time. People who live near the lake tell stories about the bell, though most believe it is only a myth. But on nights when the wind is still and the moon is full, those who walk near the shore swear they feel a deep tremor under their feet, as though something massive were vibrating far below. No one hears the bell directly. Its sound is too low, too ancient, too heavy for the human ear. Yet its vibration rises through the water, through the soil, through the bones of every person who has ever stood near the lake. It is not heard but felt, shaping emotions, stirring forgotten memories, pulling the mind into a resonance older than thought itself. This submerged bell is the hidden frequency. You do not hear it the way you hear words, but it shapes you nonetheless. Its vibration rises through every layer of your inner world, influencing how thoughts form, how emotions ripple, how meaning takes shape. Most people never know the bell exists, yet they respond to it unconsciously every day. Only those who learn to listen, not with ears, but with presence, begin to sense the pulse beneath the surface. And once they sense it, something awakens in them. They realize that the bell has been calling to them their entire lives, inviting them to tune themselves to a deeper resonance. Another symbolic narrative emerges in the form of a celestial loom, an immense, luminous structure suspended in the space between worlds. The loom is tended by a figure neither old nor young, neither male nor female, whose eyes reflect the birth and death of countless stars. Upon this loom, threads of light and shadow are woven together into patterns that ripple through every dimension. Each thread represents a possibility, a thought, a memory, a destiny. The figure weaving the tapestry does not force the threads into place, but listens to the subtle tones of each one, guiding them into harmony with the larger design. The loom hums softly, its resonance stretching across galaxies, touching every living being with vibration that shapes the unfolding of their inner and outer lives. In this story, the hidden frequency is the hum of the loom. It is the vibrational essence from which every thread of thought arises. Your mind is not weaving its own tapestry independently. It is sensing the tones of celestial loom and responding to them moment by moment. Sometimes your thoughts align with the tapestry effortlessly, flow with a sense of ease and clarity. Other times, your internal frequency becomes tangled or discordant, pulling your thoughts into confusion or inner conflict. But the loom itself never loses its coherence. Its hum remains constant, a reminder that beneath all surface turbulence, a deeper intelligence is at work. A third narrative reveals itself through the image of a mirrored forest. Imagine walking through a dense, twilight forest where every tree trunk gleams as though coated with polished silver. Each tree reflects not your physical appearance, but your unseen frequency. One tree shows you vibrating with tension, another with longing, another with hope, another with fear you never consciously recognized. As you walk deeper into the forest, you realize that the reflections shift with every thought you have. The forest is not simply mirroring you. It is showing you how your internal frequency shapes the path before you. Trails appear or vanish based on your inner resonance. Some trails narrow into dense thickets when you fall into fear. Others broaden into radiant clearings when your frequency rises into calm awareness. The forest responds to you in real time, revealing the intimate relationship between inner vibration and outer reality. This mirrored forest symbolizes the way your internal frequency shapes not only your thoughts, but the opportunities, challenges, and synchronicities that arise in your life. Every moment becomes a reflection of the vibration you carry. When you tune yourself to clarity, pathways open. When you sink into unconscious patterns, the forest grows darker, not as punishment, but as a mirror urging you to pay attention. The hidden frequency is the silent mechanism behind the forest's responsiveness, the subtle force guiding the unfolding of your inner and outer worlds. A final narrative flows from the image of a river that originates from a source no one has ever reached. The river winds through countless landscapes, mountains, valleys, deserts, forests, nourishing everything it touches. People build their lives near its banks, relying on its waters for survival. But as generations pass, they forget that the river even has a source. They take its presence for granted, believing it begins where they can see it. Only a few feel the quiet urge to travel upstream, following the river back towards origin. The journey is long and challenging. The river narrows, becomes more turbulent, then inexplicably calm. But those who persist eventually reach a place where the river is no longer water, but pure vibration, a shimmering pulse of energy appearing as a ripple in the fabric of existence itself. Here, they see that the river was never just water. It was a visible expression of an invisible current flowing from a deeper reality. The hidden frequency is that unseen current. Your thoughts are the river. The frequency is the source. When you follow your awareness upstream, into silence, inquiry, stillness, You eventually reach the place where thought dissolves into pure vibration, revealing the origin of your entire inner world. And once you glimpse this origin, even briefly, the river of your thoughts is never the same again. You begin to sense the deeper intelligence shaping their flow, and you learn to align with it instead of struggling against it. These symbolic narratives are not literal, but they point toward truths that cannot be fully understood through explanation alone. They reveal the hidden frequency as something ancient, profound, and intimately connected to the very structure of consciousness. They show that your thoughts do not arise in isolation but are woven, reflected, shaped, and sourced from a deeper vibrational field, one that has been guiding you since the moment you first entered this world. Once the hidden frequency is understood not merely as a metaphor but as a living architecture within consciousness, the question naturally shifts from what is this frequency to how does it shape my life and how can I participate in it with awareness rather than unconsciousness? Practical integration does not mean reducing these vast concepts into simple formulas or mechanical steps. Instead, it requires learning to feel the subtle shifts in your inner world, to sense the way frequency influences perception, emotion, behavior, and the unfolding of daily reality. It is the art of attunement rather than the discipline of control. And like all art, it unfolds through presence, sincerity, and the willingness to observe without rushing to conclusions. The first layer of integration begins with the recognition that every internal state you experience, clarity or confusion, expansion or contraction, peace or agitation, originates from the frequency you are resonating with at any given moment. Thoughts do not simply appear because circumstances demand them. They appear because your frequency allows them access. This realization can be both liberating and unsettling. It means that your inner world is not solely shaped by external events, but by the vibrational field you bring to those events. Two people can encounter the same situation and experience completely different emotional and mental outcomes, not because one is wiser or stronger, but because each is tuned to a different frequency. When you begin to see this in your daily interactions, life becomes less about forcing outcomes and more about choosing the vibration from which you respond. This shift in orientation creates a profound transformation in how you make decisions. Instead of asking, "What should I do?" you begin to ask, "From which frequency am I choosing to act?" Decisions made from fear, scarcity, or urgency carry a very different resonance than those made from clarity, calm, or intuitive alignment. Over time, you begin to feel the difference in your body, your breath, your thoughts. Choices rooted in lower frequencies feel heavy, constricted, rushed. Choices rooted in higher frequencies feel grounded, expansive, quietly certain. This internal calibration becomes a form of intelligence more precise than logic, more reliable than impulse. It becomes a tuning fork by which you navigate relationships, ambitions, challenges, and personal evolution. Another aspect of real-world integration emerges when you observe how environments influence the frequency you carry. Some spaces naturally elevate your internal vibration. Places of silence, nature, certain homes or studios, or the presence of particular people whose inner coherence is palpable. Other environments distort your frequency, pulling you into tension or fragmentation. When you begin to sense this, you start to understand that frequency is contagious. You exchange vibration with every environment you enter. This is not mystical, it is experiential. A single anxious person can change the emotional tone of a room. A calm, grounded presence can soften conflict without speaking a word. Every moment becomes a dialogue between internal and external frequencies. With this awareness, daily habits take on new meaning. The music you listen to, the conversations you entertain, the pace at which you move, the quality of your breath, the kind of questions you ask yourself. Each of these things subtly tunes the frequency from which your thoughts arise. You realize that what you consume is not limited to food or information. You are constantly consuming vibrations. You absorb them through media, through interactions, through the stories you tell yourself about who you are, and all of it becomes the soil from which your thoughts sprout. This is why people often experience dramatic clarity after withdrawing from noise, distraction, or emotional turbulence. The moment you stop feeding lower frequencies, your mind begins to tune naturally to something clearer, gentler, more aligned. As this understanding deepens, the nature of personal conflict changes. Instead of seeing arguments, obstacles, or emotional storms as battles to be won, you begin to see them as frequency misalignments. You start to recognize that you cannot resolve a problem from the same vibration that created it. Elevating your frequency becomes the most direct path to transforming the situation. This does not mean avoiding challenges or suppressing emotions. It means rising into a clearer state of consciousness so that your response emerges from coherence rather than confusion. In many cases, the moment your frequency shifts, the problem itself dissolves or reveals an unexpected opening. Practical integration also extends into the realm of creativity and intuition. Ideas do not emerge randomly. They arise from specific vibrational states. When your frequency is fractured, creativity feels forced, muddled, or blocked. But when your frequency becomes coherent, ideas flow effortlessly, as though you are tapping into a deeper reservoir of intelligence. Many people describe this as being in the zone or in flow, but beneath these descriptions is the underlying truth. You are resonating with a frequency that naturally generates insight. In this state, intuition sharpens, creativity expands, and decisions feel guided by something larger than the isolated self. Relationships, too, are transformed by this understanding. You begin to see that every interaction is an exchange of frequency. Some connections elevate you, making your thoughts more spacious and your emotions more harmonious. Others pull you into contraction, activating old wounds or patterns. Recognizing this does not mean judging or abandoning people whose frequency differs from yours, but it does mean relating with awareness. You learn to stay centered in your own vibration, even when others are resonating at frequencies of fear or chaos. And when you maintain your frequency consistently enough, you often shift the resonance of the entire interaction without forcing anything. Presence becomes a form of influence far more powerful than argument. This understanding also brings clarity to the process of healing. Emotional wounds persist not only because of memories, but because of the frequencies embedded within those memories. When you revisit trauma from a higher frequency, the emotional charge begins to dissolve. Not because you forgot what happened, but because your resonance is no longer compatible with the vibration of the wound. Healing becomes a process of returning to the inner world rather than fighting the past. You do not erase what happened. You transform the frequency from which you perceive it. In doing so, the memory loses its power to shape your thoughts unconsciously. Ultimately, integrating the hidden frequency into daily life reshapes your relationship with reality itself. You begin to see that life is not simply happening to you. It is responding to you. It reflects your vibration with remarkable precision, offering constant feedback about the frequency you inhabit. When you embody this awareness, you move through the world more slowly, more intentionally, more attuned to the subtle currents guiding your inner and outer experiences. You become less reactive, more observant, less fragmented, more whole. You begin to live not from the surface of thought, but from the deeper resonance beneath it. And soon, you notice something extraordinary. The hidden frequency that once shaped your life unconsciously becomes something you can shape consciously. You become both the instrument and the musician, both the wave and the observer of the wave. Life becomes less about managing thoughts and more about maintaining the vibration from which thoughts arise. In this state, clarity becomes natural, creativity becomes effortless, and meaning unfolds with a sense of quiet inevitability. There comes a moment in every deep inquiry, whether philosophical, spiritual, or simply human, when the exploration turns inward, folding back upon itself like a wave receding into the sea from which it emerged. After journeying through the vast landscapes of this hidden frequency, tracing its influence from symbolic narratives to the quiet mechanics of daily life, something begins to settle. Not a final answer, not a rigid conclusion, but a kind of inward clarity that feels less like learning something new and more like remembering something ancient. The hidden frequency that shapes every thought you've ever had is not an external force imposing its will upon you. It is the underlying resonance of your own being, the quiet pulse of consciousness expressing itself through the movements of the mind. If the journey began with awe, wondering whether such a frequency exists, it ends with recognition. You begin to see that the frequency has always been present, humming beneath the surface of your awareness, guiding you through moments of confusion, insight, longing, and revelation. Every thought is an echo of this frequency, every emotion a ripple across its surface, Every choice a tuning gesture that aligns you either closer to or further from your deeper nature. Life appears less random now, less fragmented. There is continuity to everything, a rhythmic coherence that binds your inner experience to the wider, unseen architecture of existence. To conclude this journey is to acknowledge something profound. The hidden frequency is not hidden because it is distant. It is hidden because it is ever present. Like the constant hum of the universe that your senses have learned to filter out, this frequency has been with you since the beginning. It shaped your earliest memories, your instincts, your dreams, the tone of your inner voice, the flavor of your imagination. It shaped the way you handled joy and the way you moved through grief. It shaped the way you formed relationships, the way you pursued meaning, the way you interpreted silence. And all along, it was waiting for the day you would turn inward and feel its presence intentionally. There is an undeniable transformation that occurs when you realize you are not the passive recipient of your thoughts, but the living field from which they arise. The stories you once believed were dictated by circumstance or fate reveal themselves to be expressions of resonance. Everything you once viewed as fixed becomes fluid. Everything you once saw as external becomes participatory. You are not simply navigating life. You are vibrating life into being. And the quality of your vibration influences not only your inner world, but the very fabric of experiences that unfold before you. This realization softens you. It dissolves the sense of struggle that so often defines human life. Instead of wrestling with thoughts, chasing some, fleeing from others, you begin to listen to them differently. You recognize that thoughts are not enemies or allies. They are signals. They indicate the frequency you are tuned to in this moment. When the signal is low or distorted, you do not panic. You retune. When the signal is clear and coherent, you follow it with gratitude. Awareness becomes a tuning mechanism. Breath becomes a stabilizer. Intention becomes a subtle movement of adjusting the dial. In this state, even suffering begins to take on new meaning. Pain is no longer seen as punishment, but as a sign of misalignment, a call to refine the frequency, not a demand to defeat an invisible enemy. Fear becomes a teacher rather than a tyrant, pointing you toward the parts of yourself that have been vibrating out of harmony. Healing becomes an act of remembering your natural resonance, not a battle to erase your past. Suddenly, the journey of personal growth feels less like climbing a mountain and more like returning to a home you forgot you built. The transformational call that emerges from this understanding is not dramatic. It does not ask you to abandon your life, change your identity, or reinvent yourself overnight. It asks for something subtler, something far more intimate. To begin living from a frequency beneath your thoughts rather than the surface of your thoughts. It asks you to choose presence over noise, coherence over fragmentation, awareness over habit. It invites you to treat each moment as a tuning opportunity, each breath as a chance to return to resonance, each challenge as a reminder of your own capacity to shift your vibration. Transformation in this context is not a single act, but a gradual attunement. It unfolds as you begin to notice how thoughts feel rather than what they say. It deepens when you observe how your internal state shapes external experience. It becomes embodied when you move through life with quiet confidence that you can shift your frequency at will, that you can rise above old patterns not through force, but through resonance. You stop searching for clarity as though it were something outside of you and begin to cultivate it from within. And as your frequency attunes to coherence, your life begins to reorganize itself around that coherence. Everything, relationships, creativity, decisions, opportunities, responds to your new resonance. You attract situations that match your internal state. You release those that no longer align. You begin to sense the subtle guidance that was always available, but previously drowned out by mental noise. Synchronicities increase, not because magic suddenly appeared, but because your frequency finally allows you to notice the intricate dance between consciousness and reality. In this way, the hidden frequency becomes both compass and companion. It does not dictate your path. It illuminates it. It does not choose for you. It resonates with your choices, shaping their evolution. You begin to trust yourself not because you believe you'll never make mistakes, but because you understand that even mistakes are frequency shifts that guide you toward greater alignment. Life becomes a process of continuous tuning, continuous remembering, continuous expansion. And so, The final call of this narrative is an invitation, not to master the frequency, not to dominate it, but to enter into partnership with it, to move through the world as a being who listens deeply, who feels a subtle shift beneath thought, who recognizes that consciousness is not a static property, but a living resonance. The frequency is not something separate from you. It is you in your most essential form. It is the hum of your existence, the pulse of awareness, the quiet song your soul has been singing since long before you learned to name yourself. If you allow this truth to settle, not as doctrine, not as dogma, but as a lived experience, then every thought you have from this moment forward can arise from a place of deeper alignment. You can choose the frequency of your life the way a musician chooses the key of a song. And in doing so, you begin to co-author your reality with the very force that once shaped you silently. You step into a new relationship with life, not as a wanderer lost in random thought, but as a conscious resonance moving in harmony with the unseen architecture of existence. This is the transformation that waits for you. The frequency has always been calling. Now you know how to listen.